This episode is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the #1 seller of games and gaming accessories. And GatheringMagic.com, the #1 resource for Magic the Gathering news and articles.
Hi, my name is Uriah. I created the CMDR Decks YouTube channel. Before we get to this week's deck tech, there's just a few things I wanted to say. First of all, GenCon is quickly approaching. By the time you see this video, I may be in the air already. So if you're in the Indianapolis area, or you're going to GenCon, and you want to say hi, maybe get a deck tech filmed, or play some Commander, find me. I'm pretty easy to spot, so yeah, I'll be out there all 4 days, and looking forward to meeting everyone out there. I also wanted to give a quick thank you to everyone who's watched, favorited, subscribed, liked, thumbs up, thumbs down, or whatever the channel. Recently, the channel just got the 200,000th view, and we are well over 1,200 subscribers, so thank you to anyone who has ever watched a video, and if you're watching this video right now, thank you again. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and do it. This is my 8.5 Tails Commander deck. So this is my 8.5 Tails Commander deck. Usually I gravitate towards the more powerful generals. For instance, 3 of the first 4 I ever created were Rofellos, Zur, and Memnarch. So when I decided to build 8.5 Tails, I wanted to go for something that was a little bit less powerful than what I normally would go for. And 8.5 Tails is a Fox Cleric. I decided to build around sort of a tribal cleric theme. Now that's sort of been lost a little bit with the evolution of the deck, but there are still some elements of that, so let's get into it. 8.5 Tails, if you don't know, makes spells or permanents white and then gives your permanents protection from white. So this deck is a mana hog. It's very important to have the mana for its ability, and as we'll see, there's tons of other creatures in the deck and other cards that need a lot of mana to do what they do best. A lot of basics here. 26 planes is what we're looking at, and it's really important that this deck never misses a land drop. It's always a good thing to have land, whether you're replaying 8.5 Tails for the 8th time or whatever. It's always very nice to have those land drops constantly hitting play. And white, although it's not really known for having ramp, there are some elements in here and some cards that I do have which do allow me to go ahead and get additional lands into play, and then to also increase my mana. So we'll be getting to those here shortly. One of those cards is Terrain Generator. Pay 2 tap, put a basic land into play tapped. Pretty important when I have a lot of basics in the deck in order to go ahead and drop those. I like to get some creatures back, and Emeria usually hits once there's 8 lands in play. Usually the other 7 lands are going to be plains. So this is a good way to get value back out of your creatures coming back from the graveyard. Mistveil Plains counts as a plane, so that helps towards Emeria. Also, sometimes they're just cards you want to put back into your library. There's not a ton of shuffle effects in this deck, but enough to make it worth it to put something on the bottom and get it back later. New Benalia Scry. The coming to play tapped is not huge for this, and then the scrying is pretty good. Eiganjo Castle. There used to be a lot more legendary cards in this deck. There were some legendary clerics that I have cut, like Orem, for instance, was cut. So this doesn't really pull as much weight as it normally could, but I still have it in the deck just in case. Windbrisk Heights usually, honestly, does not trigger. This deck is not a very aggro deck. There's not a lot of attacking, and usually if there is attacking, it's usually only with 1, maybe 2 creatures. Sometimes, though, I do get the 3 creatures, and I do get the free spell off this, which makes it just worth it enough for me to play it. But normally, not getting too much value off the Windbrisk Heights. Maze of Ith just to stop, a Voltron attack from another general. I do have a bit of land destruction, Strip Mine, Tech Edge, and Wasteland, just in case they have permanent lands there that are causing me some issues. So let's go ahead and get into our cleric package first, since that's still the initial main theme of the deck. Probably one of the best 1-drops ever, and probably almost certainly the best 1-drop cleric ever. You have Mother of Ruins. Then to help get some more land out and get the lands that you need, the non-basics, we have Withered Wayfarer. Good old Soul Warden Cleric. This deck wants to have a lot of life, so Soul Warden maybe usually not that good, but because she counts as a cleric and because she gains the life, she's a pretty important card for this deck. This is Devoted Caretaker. It's a 1/2 on 1, pay a white and tap. Target permanent you control gains protection from instants or sorceries till the end of turn, which actually can be pretty relevant. If you got some 1-for-1 removal, this can stop it unless they're prepared for it. So that's a pretty decent card there, and it is a cleric, so that does help my cleric counts. Songstitcher is a 1-drop 1/1 cleric. Pay 1 white and 1. Target attacking creature with flying deals no combat damage this turn. This deck has a lot of issues with flyers, so the fact that I can just pay 2 to fog a big flyer that might be going in for an Alpha Strike, pretty important in this one. It's an Urza Saga uncommon, so you may not have seen that one before. This is one of my favorite techie cards that I found for this deck when I was looking at all the clerics. It's Planar Guide, a 1/1 on 1, pay 4, remove Planar Guide from the game, and then exile all creatures and return to play at the end of the turn under their owner's control. So this is really good if you have a general on the other side that relies on a bunch of counters. Maybe you have like the Mimeoplasm or Kresh or something, or if you're facing down a token army from, let's say, Hazazen or Rith. You can get rid of those counters permanently, you can get rid of those tokens permanently. It's almost like a fog too. If they're attacking with their whole army, pay 4, remove them from the game, they're no longer attacking. It's a good way also if I have a creature that I want to save and there's a removal headed its way or there's a wrath hitting the table, pay 4, bounce everything, and then hope when I come back in at the end step, my turn is next and then I can capitalize on whatever I needed to save. Mikaeus, another 1-drop cleric that can make all my other clerics bigger or make itself bigger. We move into our 2-drop clerics, Grand Abolisher, makes it harder, sort of impossible really, for our opponents to play stuff on our turn, which is pretty important. Knowing that you can play a card without getting countered, that's pretty cool stuff. Suture Priest, I gain a life. When I have a creature coming to play, they lose a life when they have a creature coming to play, and it is a cleric. True Believer gives me Shroud, and it's a 2-drop cleric. Preacher, old school from the dark. This is also a cleric. It has been errated. And this is an Italian version, Predicatore, and it steals creatures. So I sort of like the Italian name. Sort of fits for what it does more than the word preacher does, the original English name for it. So big fan of this one. I like stealing creatures in white. People usually don't expect it. So that's pretty fun there. We have Transcendent Master. Once you get it up to 12, usually pretty hard to kill because of the indestructibility. You can feel pretty safe wrathing the board and then just start attacking with a 9/9 lifelinker. Of course, it's going to lose to a Swords or a Path, but then maybe hopefully you have 8.5 Tails out there to give it protection, or the Devoted Caretaker, something like that, and it also counts as a cleric, so that's important. Kor Sanctifiers counts as a cleric, and enchantment or artifact destruction if I pay the kicker. Usually there's a target for enchantment and artifact destruction, so no issue there. Doubtless One is a cleric avatar, so power and toughness equal to the number of clerics in play, and then whenever it deals damage you gain that much life. So since that's not lifelink, it can also stack with lifelink. I don't know if I have any more ways to give lifelink in this deck, but if I did, I would gain double life just because the wording is not lifelink on this one. So usually not too huge. Like I said, I don't have a ton of clerics left in the deck. Usually when C's play the 3/3 or 4/4, I just like it because it still sticks to that old cleric theme that I started with the deck. Battletide Alchemist is probably the original cleric that made me decide I wanted to do a cleric commander deck. It's a 3/4 on 5. If a source would deal damage to a player, you may prevent X of that damage, where X is the number of clerics you control. So that's any X damage to any player. So it can be used politically. Do I tend to use it politically? No, because usually I want my other opponents dead. So usually I'm just using this to protect myself. But once you start dropping like 3 to 4 to even 5 clerics, it's really going to gum up the board, and people are not going to want to attack into you. This is better than a Ghostly Prison in my mind. So that's why I still have those clerics in there, because I want to make sure I get the cleric counts for the Alchemist. Then we move on to our Glairecaster, another great piece of tech that I found when I was looking for clerics. This thing is a mana hog. It'll eat mana till the cows come home. It's a 3/3 flyer on 6, but then if you pay 1 white 5, the next time damage would be dealt to Glairecaster or to you this turn, that damage is dealt to target creature or player instead. So For 6 mana, you can redirect any damage on the board, essentially, that as long as it's coming at you or Glarecaster, which is huge. The problem is having that 6 mana up continuously. You know, would a Seedborn Muse in this deck be awesome? Absolutely. A Seedborn Muse would be great, especially with the Glarecaster. So maybe in a white-green deck it would be a little bit better, but I like it for what it is, and it still counts for my Cleric count there. Felidar Sovereign. Since I'm gaining so much life in this deck, and since you start out at 40 anyway in Commander, Felidar Sovereign sort of like an Oops, I Win card. Because this deck's not that good, an Oops, I Win card is okay for me. So Felidar Sovereign, pretty good. Some of my non-cleric spells, creatures I should say, Fox Monk, not a Fox Cleric. Usually this is going to flip as soon as it comes into play, and then it flips into Rune-Tail's Ascendant to prevent all damage. That would be dealt to creatures you control. So you can just sit there and chump block all day with your 1/1 Songstitcher without having to worry about it dying. This is almost never a creature when it comes into play. We have Ranger of Eos. As you saw, there were a ton of 1-drop clerics, so this is pretty good, getting just whatever 2 I need for whatever situation is. When I do have clerics die, they are pretty cheap as far as their power is concerned, so when I have Revelark leave, it's pretty good to get back a couple of my guys. Glory, when it goes to the yard, I can give my creatures a pro color for 3, sort of like 8.5 Tails. It can also sort of give like a blanket if I have a lot of guys that I want to be attacking with. So have that in there for that. Eternal Dragon, just a plain cycle to help me make sure I can hit my land drops, and then late game, you know, start to recur it if I need to. Eventually I started to add the bigger fatties because this deck really didn't have that reach where it could end a game. I've never killed anyone with commander damage with 8.5 Tails. I've gotten to 20 a couple of times, but I've never actually gone the full way. So I wanted to have a couple of the big creatures in here in order to make sure I could kill someone if I was given the chance. And because 8.5 Tails can let me pass around the pro color ability, it makes my big creatures that much better. So Serra Avatar, one of the original big baddies, especially with my life gain theme, it can get quite large, and then usually can one-shot someone if I have my 8.5 Tails with a lot of mana out. Elish Norn just makes my little dudes bigger and kills, you know, their little dudes. You have a Chroma, of course. And then Blazing Archon, just a leave me alone, don't attack me, but I'm still going to attack you with my 5/6 flyer and my other guys. A little bit more help on the mana. We have a Soul Ring, and also Pearl Medallion makes my white spells cost 1 less. Not a whole lot of colorless cost in this deck, but enough for me to make it worth it to include that. Also want to make sure I throw a land tax in, that way I can continue to hit those land drops later. Also Endless Horizons is good for that as well. Now you want to be careful with this card. If you take out too many planes and it gets hit by a Naturalize, then you're going to be hurting. So what I tend to do is I tend to take half my deck, strip all the planes out of half of it, and then at least take my Mistveil Plains. And usually I'll get the Mistveil Plains first, and then I'll start to slowly get the other planes out on the upkeep as long as someone decides not to kill it. And usually if you've only got like 7 or 8, maybe 9 planes underneath it, it's not going to be a huge target for someone unless, you know, they want to try to keep you off your land if you're really hurting for it. Another way to get land, we have Journeyer's Kite, and then also Cage Sun to double up our planes and our white mana once we hit 6. The only Planeswalker I run in this is Gideon. He's a good way to essentially fog for a turn if I need, or if I've just wiped the board and I can lay him down and then start putting the beats on the next turn. He can be pretty good, and also another way to kill creatures in here, so that's important. Because again the deck is not very impressive, I decided pretty early on to include a Scepter and a Scepter package in it. So we have a couple cards that work with that. Enlightened Tutor, there's a decent number of artifacts and enchantments that you'll see, so I can put it under Scepter. It's usually not one of the cards I will pick if I have the opportunity to, but it is one that does work. Then we have some pretty standard removal, Swords to Plowshare, Path to Exile, and then Condemn. If I'm playing Scepter, yeah, I'm playing Chant too. The thing, it's only good really in 1 versus 1 in multiplayer games. You have to decide who you want to not be the person to play spells or to attack you if that's the case. But I do have Chant in there. Also running Silence, which is a little bit better than Chant as far as it says opponents instead of just an opponent. I got my Korean Abeyance in the mail the other day. This shuts down instant sorceries and activated abilities for a turn, but it also draws you a card. So the fact that it can replace itself for free because you're playing it off the Scepter is pretty good. So Abeyance, I like that one a lot. Just to disenchant because I want to go ahead and have some way to deal with problem instants and sorceries. Sorry. Enchantments and artifacts. Yeah. So let's go and get some of the more removal type cards. Karmic Justice, if you mess with my stuff, I'm going to mess with your stuff. People tend to shy away from, destroying any of your stuff once you land the Justice, and they'll try to take this out first just so they can minimize how many permanents of theirs that you can destroy. Standard, we have O-Ring, we have a Wrath. Predator Flagship allows me to maybe give one of my big guys flying if I can't give it protection from a color. Let's say 8.5 Tails was shuffled into the library somehow. Just let me maybe try to get some evasion on a big dude to get through. I can also destroy creatures with flying, and then also since it gives flying, I can pretty much destroy most creatures on the board as long as they don't have, Troll Shroud or something like that. Hollow Burial, just to get rid of annoying commanders once mine's off the table. Chroma's Vengeance, Planar Cleansing, destroy everything. A little bit of library manipulation. We have Top. Idyllic Tutor to get some of the better enchantments out of the library. Planar Portal. Because this deck is a mana hog and then sometimes it really ramps up and you can get access to a lot of mana, the Planar Portal cost is not too high on this card. 6 to play, 6 to search for any card. And then once you get it out with enough land, you can really search up whatever card's best for the situation that's going to help you win the quickest. I play a lot. Well, I don't know if a lot is a correct term there, but I play with graveyard removal. I think it's very important to play with graveyard removal. If you don't have any in your deck, then I think that, personally, at least in my play group, is a big mistake. So I have Relic and Crypt for that. 8.5 Tails, it's a colors matter general. Distorting Lens changes the color of permanents. So essentially it's just a free activation card that I can use to help make 8.5 Tails just a little bit better. Then I have Pariah Shield. If I can get this on 8.5 Tails, or if I can get it on my Transcendent Master, it's really great. It's better than Pariah itself because it is a colorless card. That way I can give 8.5 Tails pro white without having Pariah fall off and then essentially be useless. Then we have Lunarch Ascension. Sometimes you drop this on turn 2 and you just win the game. Beacon, just get my life total back up really high. Also, if I can, Beacon, then next turn drop Felidar Sovereign. If I'm in, the 70 to 80 life range, they usually have to deal with Felidar instead of just trying to knock a couple damage off me in order to prevent me from winning the game. Rune Halo, it's tutorable with, a couple of cards in the deck, and it can shut off an opposing commander pretty easily, or whatever their biggest threat is at the time. Erratic Portal, it's a crystal shard that is colorless, which is pretty important. Crystal shard, one of the better cards in my opinion, so Erratic Portal, I can use it in white. Well of Lost Dreams, because I am gaining so much life and I want to draw cards white, not really known for drawing cards, I can turn that life gain into card draw, and especially because I'm trying to pump out that land, usually I can have at least 1 or 2 mana up when I'm gaining life, especially with Soul Warden, it's pretty good. Then we have Leyline of Sanctity, just give myself Troll Shroud for free. And finally, Norn's Annex, just another card to say, hey, leave me alone. Really not as good as the Battletide Alchemist, and could it be Ghostly Prison? Sure. But usually paying the 2 life for each white mana symbol for the Phyrexian mana to get it out, a little sooner can be okay, and then, sometimes your opponent will lose a couple life here and there, which over the course of a game might be important enough. Thanks for watching CMDR Decks, and as always, please subscribe and favorite.